Okay, in this video I just wanted to talk about some of the issues that I kind of see with like the newer Lumix cameras, and I don't want this to be too downbeat because Lumix have just released the Panasonic G9 II and it looks great. It's got the PDAF that everyone's been waiting for. It's even got a ton more video features than I personally thought it would ever release with, and it looked really good. It looks like a great camera, but one issue that I've really sort of starting to see in like these releases is one of the things that always to me was like a core part of why I like Lumix cameras was essentially the dual card recording, and I'll leave a link up in the corner to how all of those work and what they are. But essentially you've got things like backup recording is the main one that's affected by this. But so on the GH6 we've got one CF Express slot and one SD card slot, and that in itself kind of creates some issues. You've got some of the file types that can be recorded in camera on this card, and some of them just can't be recorded in the camera if you don't have the CF Express card. So the SD card can't handle, for example, the larger video sizes of ProRes, for example, which is maybe a bit of an extreme case, but even like the All-I codecs, you've got things that can't go onto the SD card slot. So once you get to that level, you essentially can't be doing backup recording anymore because only this card can do it. And it is amazing that you can do that kind of internally anyway. So I mean, it's really good, but I don't like the fact that I suddenly, in some video modes, I'm losing the secondary backup. And then one thing Panasonic really love to shout about is, the SSD recording, which, again, that's great. You can get a 2 TB drive for less than £100, plug it into the camera, and you've just got hours and hours and hours of recording. But again, the problem is that the SSD drive and the cards don't talk to each other. So even in this case of the GH6, I've got this card here, the CF Express, that can handle all those higher frame rates, yet I still can't use this as a backup to the SSD drive, or I can't use the SSD drive as a backup to this card. So you're still left in that sort of place of not having backup recordings for everything. And then with the with the new S series cameras and the new G9, they've just got 2 SD card slots, and that's kind of fine, but obviously you're only going to be able to record up to kind of certain bit rates with that. And then obviously with the G9, they've not sold it as a video camera, so it's not a huge kind of issue there. But again, half of the video sort of formats for it, ProRes, All-I, they have to go straight to an SSD because the SD cards can't even handle that. So you don't even have the choice to shoot that internally. You can do HD ProRes internally, but beyond that, you're shooting to SSD again. So for me, one thing that Lumix really need to kind of get right is we need some kind of backup that sort of talks between the SSD and the cards in the camera. I mean, even if we're talking about SD cards that, even if a V90 can't handle that speed, you just need something where this can record it and then it can just slowly trickle onto the SD card in whatever speed it takes. But it's just whether that ties up too much of the processing in the camera, which, I guess it does, just all that kind of buffer. But I just kind of feel like they're getting a lot of things right now. They're getting the AF right, and loads of other little bits, but it's almost coming full circle now where this is just getting so messy with SSDs and different card types and card slots in different cameras that can only handle certain video types and frame rates, where you're almost losing the kind of stability that you used to have on the Lumix cameras, and it's all just going like a little bit kind of wayward. But it's one of those things where you can see that they're tied into other companies like Condor Blue and SanDisk, because they're shilling that handle every second they get. But you really need something kind of reliable. It's on them to actually create something that kind of works for backup recording. So I'm kind of hoping that something kind of comes about with that, because I think what we've got at the moment, to be honest, is just a bit of a mess, like from what we had before. And in a way, the same kind of goes for the battery. You know, I know a lot of people don't really complain about it. If you're a hybrid shooter or shoot photos, then it's probably not that big of a deal. But if you're shooting any kind of long form recording, the battery on these cameras is really not that good. It's you know, the BLK22 I don't think is the best, and it's it's one of those things that, you know, it's just going into more and more cameras. So it's it's a difficult one. You know, if you shoot long form video, you obviously want to be using using the dummy battery, because it's the only way really you can work, because otherwise you're tying up if you use an SSD, you're obviously tying this port up, and then you can't get power into the camera anymore. So I'd like to see, I guess, as like a summary, because this is just a bit of a rambly video. I'd kind of like to see, you know, more USB-C ports on the camera, so they're not tied up. You know, that'll help us with the battery issues. You can have one for USB-C power, you can have one for SSD, if that's the way they're going to kind of continue with this. But then I'd also like to see some kind of way that we can have backup recording again, because like I say, for me that was one of the top features of the, you know, the Lumix brand. It was one of those things where it used to be, you need two card slots, and then it was kind of like, oh, but now you need autofocus, that needs to be really good. And then this part of the camera now is slipping while the other part's getting good. So it's just one of those things that I kind of find a bit frustrating about the cameras. But let me know your thoughts in the comments, because it can't just be me that thinks this. But that's it really.